I think we just have to figure out ways that we can help them so they can be successful in life. Like, it's not just about seventh grade. It's not just about eighth grade. It's about teaching these kids and working with the parents and having them realize like these skills are transferable to adults. Like,
right. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Oasis Space, where we disrupt your current chaos with curated peace. I am your host, Patrice Grimes, also known as the Peace Creator. And if this is your first time tuning in, we are a community called Peace Pursuits, where we believe the definition of peace is a term that I've coined to be an acronym that means being able to pivot even as chaos ensues. The reality of it is, folks, is that conflict and chaos will occur in your life in some way, shape, or form, whether it is conflicting thoughts, conflicting situations, conflicting behaviors, or situations between two people, which is the one that most folks identify with. It will happen. And so we are here to identify alternative perspectives that will help us transform that conflict into peace. So again, welcome if this is your first time, and welcome back to all of my regular peace pursuits out here. Look, I'm not going to waste too much time because we are kicking off a new series this week called Embracing for Impact. That's right. I'm going to say it again. It's called Embracing for Impact. And I want to emphasize this because I know we oftentimes hear the term bracing for impact, which is generally used when we want to brace ourselves for disappointment, brace ourselves for this shock to the body, right? But what happens when we actually embrace for impact? When we embrace our children, in fact, for impact, right? And what I'm talking about here is different topics. Over the next several weeks, we're going to have various guests come in and speak to us because, again, in the Oasis Space, we talk about how we're transforming conflict into peace, particularly as it relates to our personal relationships and our professions. And one of the most personal relationships that we have is with our children, right? And so I have found that how much more of a peaceful world can we live in? How can we operate in peace as parents, for those of you that are parents that listen to this show, or those of you that maybe your aunt, but you have some children in your life, right? So you may be an auntie, you may be an uncle, whatever the case may be, a sibling, but there is some child in your life that by society's terms has not been embraced for whatever reason, right? By society's terms, they have been disregarded, or maybe they have been viewed as differently, or we realize that they're going to have some challenges ahead of in their lives that maybe, quote, normal people would not encounter, right? And so that's what we want to talk about, is how do we embrace our children for impact so that they can actually go out into this world, create impact, and be exactly who they're called to be. So again, I'm not going to talk too much because the guest we have today is none other than my girl, Amanda Gittens. And as a quick bio, Amanda is an experienced learning disabilities teacher. She has 6 years in secondary education, and she's a professional development trainer. She has her master's in special education, and she currently serves as a special education instructional coach. Listen, y'all, this episode is so good because I realize that, I think it's so timely as our children are returning back to school, because we know how difficult it was for them during the pandemic, but even more so for children that have what I like to call unique learning abilities, right? And so again, these are people and children that probably historically have not been in the most optimal situation. We already know that they may face some challenges in life. And we recognize that as parents of a child with unique learning abilities, this may present some challenges to you. It may present some conflict within you, right? Let's keep it real. We keep it real here in the Oasis Space. Nobody has a child that immediately says, oh, great, lucky me, right? Nobody expects those challenges to take place and they feel blessed immediately, right? It takes some time to get to that that space. But that's exactly what we're talking about here, and how we are going to navigate that throughout the pandemic, and just some really great resources if you are encountering this, or if you know someone that is encountering this with a child with unique learning abilities. So again, without further ado, I'd like to welcome you all to the Oasis Space with Miss Amanda Gittens. Okay. We are back for another episode of the Oasis Space with my girl, my sister, Amanda Gittens. Okay, let me tell y'all something about this woman here. This is my road dog. Like, this is the what do they say? The day one, the A1 since day one, all of that. Like, that's who she is. Like, we've been riding together since we was 13 years old. And I am so happy to have Amanda in this space, because as we talk about this series, Embracing for Impact, I thought of this topic and how she represents this community of children that oftentimes when we talk about how we want to embrace for impact, it's generally the population of children that are in some ways ostracized, that are looked at differently, that are, by society in some ways cast aside or looked at as different. And, I thought it was really important for us to talk to her in this topic, because I know how passionate she is in this role and the work that she does. And I thought, with the school season starting back, it's a perfect opportunity to discuss, the education of these students, and particularly how they just learn differently, and how we can support this particular community as we are transforming our relationships, our personal relationships with our children, from conflict into peace. So without further ado, welcome, Amanda. So happy to have you here.
Thank you for bringing me on. And yes, you have chosen the perfect topic for me, because I am very passionate about my children and their needs, and also the teachers that work with them, and the parents that brought them into this world and making a difference in their lives and changing me as a whole person, as well as changing them. So
yes, yeah, girl, look, and you already hit it, because I just gave the sneak peek about how the relationships are affected with the children. But like you say, we're definitely going to get into how you help in these different dynamics between the teachers that you support and lead, as well as the parents. So it's not just about the students. And so I'm glad you brought that up, right? But I'm gonna try to, I'm gonna keep it professional on this podcast, because we be cutting up, and I say aims, and we gonna keep it
yes.
the government, okay?
Okay.
You in the professional right now space, and we always, like, we keep it authentic. We me and you, we know each other. Like I said, we go way back, so we gonna keep it classy, but I ain't gonna cut up too much,
I will keep it cute. I will keep it cute. I will try.
So when we talk about, like I say, the school season has started back, I think all kids now across the country, for the most part, are back in school. And doesn't matter what county they're in, doesn't matter what state, country, most students are now back in school. And I know there's still variations of what that looks like. The pandemic happened, it shut down everything, it changed the dynamics of how students were learning in general, from an in-class environment to a virtual environment. And now, as the world is, quote, starting to normalize somewhat, we know we have some students that are back in the school. We have some students that are still having the option to learn virtually. And then there's these hybrid models. There's various models, right? So talk to us just very briefly about how that experience was for you as someone in the education space when the pandemic hit. Like, what were some of those challenges, and maybe even some of the positives that came out of it?
Okay, so basically, when the pandemic hit, we went to school up till that Thursday, and then that Friday they were like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna close school, and then Monday you will return, and we'll do some professional development and things like that." It was so relaxed that I left my good lunchbox in the refrigerator at school, and I was like, "I'll get it Monday, whatever." So I never got my box back, because clearly it was moldy and oldie. But
Okay.
yes, it was that quick that life changed. Like, it was no it was crazy.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of us feared the fear of unknown. Like, we didn't know if we would ever get back to school.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't know what measure we were going to be under, because, like, in teaching, just like any other career, you're held under standards and you have annual reviews and things like that. So then we started to think, oh my gosh, like, are kids going to fail these state tests and will be held responsible? Is it going to be something on our license? Like, those are the things we started thinking. And then we started thinking about our kids, that our school is their heartbeat. Like, that is their safe place. Like, they get to leave their homes, whatever chaos is going on. And we were the ones that, encouraged them and things like that, and gave them motivation. And what were they doing? Like, there was
Mm-hmm.
no safe place. We worried about them. We worried about my population with the special ed kids that require direct instruction. They
Mm-hmm.
require one-on-one and things like that. And we were concerned, like, would we be able to teach them through the computer? Like, would we be able to reach them? Would they learn? Some of them with the emotional disabilities, would they be able to sit down and focus and actually listen to us? So it
Yeah.
was a lot of fear of the unknown for us. I know, as a special ed teacher, I was nervous. Like, I didn't know what to say or what to do. And I think people were like, yay, teachers are heroes. But then in our own lives, we were trying to figure out, like, what's really going on. We
Right.
had to get up and put a face on and be animated and be on the screen. But
Mm.
on the inside, we were like scared. Like, we didn't know what was going to happen. And
Right.
then when the governor shut down, we were like, oh, this is serious. Like, what is this? So
Right.
I think that it was a little bit of a shock, and it was like, how can I do my job? And I know throughout the year we got, guidance and regulations and things like that that were supportive, but
Yeah.
it still was fear of the unknown, like anybody else that was experiencing the pandemic.
Right. Yeah. And that's so tough because, like you say, I definitely, I mean, I've always admired what you do because Lord knows, like, I told the Father when this little penny hit, I said, oh, you knew what you was doing, God, to not have me with no children. And, I saw colleagues, trying to balance homeschooling kids and also working similar, like you say, you have your own life going on and trying to still encourage these students and these children of tomorrow, while also trying to figure out, well, what the heck is happening, and you also have loved ones that you're concerned about, right? There was so much going on, and so again, it just gave me such a greater respect for the educators across America and what you all were doing, how you were juggling all of what was unfolding before everyone's eyes. Now, one of the things that it brought up for me, because like I said, obviously we went through this. We're not all the way through it yet, but we do know there are some schools that have returned back to in classroom teaching. And I know you and I have had conversations before, as well as and even conversations I've had with other parents have spoken about how, when you mention, hey, for my population, particularly with special education, are they going to be able to still learn the way we need them to learn? Are they going to stay engaged? And we saw some excel in that space. So I say to that, is that something you all are still considering now? Now that you're back in the in classroom setting, is that something that you all have considered as far as this population of, hey, we've learned that this group of students maybe learn better virtually and we're going to give them this option? Or is it just more so mandatory across the school that students need to return or what have
So
you?
at this time, it's kind of still in the air. They're looking at the numbers of COVID, but yes, the hybrid is still an option. At the beginning of the school year, parents that were still unsafe and unsure about the regulations and the masking and things like that. They were given the opportunity to have their students participate virtually
Mm-hmm.
through Virtual Virginia. And the crazy thing is, in all of the 7 years I was teaching, I never even knew we had Virtual Virginia. So it took a whole pandemic to know that each state has a virtual homeschool program that you can, not preferably homeschool, but it's virtual, and they have certified teachers that work with your students and things like that. So this wasn't a new thing. It was something that was kept under wrap. But yes,
Wow.
it's been available for people. And then for this school year, it kind of revved up because some teachers did not return to the classroom
Mm-hmm.
to protect their families, which if you think about teaching, a lot of people like teaching, going into teaching. A, they love the kids, but be your home with your kids. You're able to make those sacrifices and things like that. Like, you get those summers off and spring
Mm-hmm.
break. So on one end, the teachers got hit like, oh my goodness, it's a pandemic. And then on the other end, they were still parents. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so they were offered these options. I know with the county I was in, they had the virtual the last school year. So once it was safe enough to go back in the building, students were able to go back. And they also offered flexibility from parents that were kind of like, I was unsure at first, but let my kid try it to come back. Because ultimately the goal for all of us was to return. And that came from the governor. So the governor was like, we really need all of our students back in. We need it to be a safe environment. And you guys have to follow these protocols and things like that. But I can say that on our end, it seems like it's going well. But of course, cases are going to happen and kids have to quarantine and things like that. So it's still a process that parents have to work with and understand. Like even teachers are out. Like in our county I currently work for, like if a teacher or if there was a case, you're out for 24 days. You have 10 days, you have 2 weeks of quarantine and then additional 10 days. So you're out for 24 days. And then you can come back. I know some students have gone out multiple because they were around multiple different friends. So they had multiple days. So that can also be a struggle. But those are just the safety precautions that we have to take for our students and ourselves, like for us to be healthy. So.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think it comes with just everyone being willing to be adaptable to the process because everybody is just going through the process together. So that's a good point. Now, we started this episode, like I said, I've definitely wanted to hone in. I mean, obviously, all the students are important, but even particularly as we talk about the students that require special education, I like to even say, unique learning abilities, right? So for those students, it's a different world for them, right? It's navigating learning in the classroom in a different way than the average, quote, traditional student. What has been your experience working with them during this time period and in general, I guess? Like, what have you seen as a part of working with this population? And I believe there's a certain process that you all go through to identify which students would require, quote, special education or and such.
Yes. So when you when a student they go under testing, they do the testing for educational, they do a psychological, they do a social testing, and they're looking for deficits in learning. They are compared to their average peers, and then they fall on like a standard. If they're below that standard, then we start to look deeper into maybe some issues or difficulties for that student. So once they go through that process with parent consent, they're put into different placements. On the middle school level in which I work, there are 3 different placements. There's that small group where you're in the smallest setting with a special ed teacher and IA. Then there's a team taught setting where you have a general ed teacher and a special ed teacher. And then there are some students that are in a general ed class, but they just need extra prompts and support. For all, I would say that some of our students did excel during the COVID time because a lot of them experienced the emotional disabilities of anxiety and things like that and being overwhelmed. And basically during COVID, we weren't able to get into the 20 assignments that we usually do. We were down to 6. So we were literally, as I would say, we were serving meat and potatoes. Like there was no side dish. We didn't give you no bread or butter. Like it is what it is.
Right.
And I did notice my students' scores were better. The test scores were better because I just taught what mattered for me. So for them, once they were taking the test, they were like, oh, okay, yeah, this is the answer. So they did better. Some of the parents did appreciate I was in that 7th grade transition where you went from elementary to middle school. So a lot of kids struggle. And then that's the year that you start to learn about a little bit more about your student because they are put into multiple settings. It's not just like in elementary where you have 1 or 2 teachers, like you have 8 different teachers. People give different feedback. Your child can be different. You start to learn more about those things. And that's why I encourage parents, like once your child does get diagnosed, to do your own research. Just kind of look around and get some researches. There are plenty of resources out there. IDA has a great resource. They're also there's disabilities, whatever disability your child is. I'm sure there is a website that will let you know some ins and outs. But for our students, I think that the best place is in person, but they did work well. We were able to utilize the chat rooms and we were able to utilize we had like a study hour where students could come and visit us and we could work with them one-on-one. I'm not going to say it was a total loss, but I think it was the best we could do.
Right.
And I think a lot of our students, some of them excelled and some of them shut down. And I think parents started to realize how much support the school gives their children. And so it was kind of eye-opening to see a lot of our students struggled with some emotional things. And it was clear to understand, like, when you're at school and your kids are at school, you really know what the teacher says. But if you're
Right.
actually seeing your child have a whole breakdown while while at home and things like that, you start to get a better understanding how your student is in the classroom as well.
Right, right. And that's how common is that, right? We don't realize how good something is until it's gone, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
We realize like, okay, yeah, we appreciate the teachers. Oh, we appreciate the school system, but it isn't until that support, that piece of that village is actually removed that you understand how much of an impact they are making, how much of these teachers were allowing you to maybe show up more fully as yourself at work or whatever, right? Because you've
Yeah.
been aware that some of these instances or these behaviors, emotional breakdowns were taking place. So I think, I like to say a lot of times, sometimes things have to fall apart in order for them to fall together, for them to make sense for people. So that's a good thing to know. Now, one thing I'm not sure if I caught, Amanda, when you were talking about the testing process, is this something that every student goes through to test the psychological and the emotional behavior?
So no, it is. So basically, a student is put through. If there are concerns about a student, a teacher puts them up for review. So basically, they review some of their testing and their general tests they take in class, some of those things, and then often another access is if parents are concerned, then they can request the testing. And so they would reach out to Child Find. Child Find is located in all of the school systems.
Okay.
They would reach out to the Child Find representative, and they would reach out to the school that your child attends. And you would sign off. They would meet and ask you about, basically gather the data, make sure like, okay, we see this at school and this is what's going on. And mom and dad would request those, or parent guardian would request that testing. And then they would come back to the table after the testing is done. They would review, and then they would go through an eligibility process. You have to meet a certain criteria in order to be eligible for special education services.
Yeah.
If you don't reach that, there is 504. 504 accommodations that help support general ed students that need a little extra support. So they just determine which better suits the child's needs at the time when they're at the eligibility table.
Okay. That makes sense. Now, have you seen in this field that there are certain populations of students, or whether it's certain specific communities or specific genders, that they are affected more by a certain learning unique ability or emotional kind of disability per se? Is that common?
Yes.
See certain patterns
Yes.
of those? Okay.
So it does show up in the poverty communities. A lot of that shows up in our boys, brown and black. Those things show up in the forms of behaviors, and behaviors are learned. And if behaviors are allowed, they escalate. So then at that point, the child, if the behavior is so high, they're unavailable for learning. And it literally affects their learning, because if I've basically, in my words, cut up the whole school year, then I'm not going to get any of the education that was brought forth to me. So then I see a prevalence in African American boys and Hispanic boys putting in placement of the special education category. A lot of them are put up. Some of their behaviors are escalate and things like that. So they need behavior management and things like that. So I've seen a lot of that. The emotional piece, I think it ranges, but in my 7 years, it's been a lot of boys. Every once in a while, it's a girl, but it's a lot of boys that I've seen. So
now, how much of that, and I don't know if you can even share this or not. So if not, please go ahead and pass, because we want to keep your job. But how much of this do you find that is like, I guess my question is more around, how do you all determine if it is genuinely a behavioral or emotional concern versus, like, sometimes we find that students are bored in the class, right? Because they're actually gifted, and then the class is actually maybe going too slow for them or something like that, right? So they tend to act out, cut up, like you said. They may cut up because it's like, this is this is below me, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm past this. I'm gone. Like, you know,
I'm bored. Yeah.
I'm a couple of grades ahead of y'all. How you all really define and diagnose that, hey, this is a real genuine behavioral or emotional concern that we want to make sure we help this student get through?
So I would say schools have psychologists and counselors that go in and do observations.
Mm,
If a student is struggling with behavior concerns, they do. I know in the bigger counties, they have behavioral specialists or ABA counselors that come out,
okay.
and they are specialized. They break the behavior down to the antecedent, like the cause, the behavior, and then the consequence.
Mm-hmm.
Or so the purpose of the behavior is found out, like they try to resource. So when you're speaking of a child that's bored, usually, if they have an advocate or teacher that's rallying for them, they will advocate for them to get testing. So there is a testing that can place a kid in advanced or GT. That's the gifted program. Where students can go to other classes, like they could be in first grade and go into a second grade class, or they're in a classroom where accelerated learning occurs.
Mm-hmm.
But once again, that's all about teachers and the advocate and like actually identifying. It's funny that you tell that story because that's exactly what happened to my brother.
Mm-hmm.
My brother was in first grade acting up, and they called my mom about his behavior. And then after his advocate teacher, with
Right.
like I said, she advocated for them, and they took him to. He went to second grade. He went to
Right.
the grade above, and he would stay there. Now his maturity level wasn't there, but he
Mm-hmm.
went there and he would come back. So that's something that they do in the education system. So
Yeah.
you just, if a teacher's there and advocating and rallying for you, or even as a parent, like if
Right.
you feel like this your kid knows this information, there are those programs where you can get referrals so the students can get to that accelerating learning where they really belong. So
Right, right. And I think that's a good point, right? Because in your case with your brother, he was gifted, he needed to skip a level because he was bored. But sometimes we see, and I hate to say it, right? We hate, I know before I think information was readily available to us, before we really knew what some of these diagnoses were called, I do believe there were some cases of misdiagnoses, right? Like I think that was probably prevalent in communities where we would see that if someone appeared to be hyper, right, they would quickly be put on. I think they were, again, I don't know if it was defined as ADHD at the time, but it was definitely something of this person has problem paying attention, when in actuality they were, again, like they were bored, they were smart, right? So we have cases where it sounds like teachers can be the advocate, but also parents need to know what's really happening in the classroom, what's being said about the student, and advocating for their child to be tested so that they aren't potentially misdiagnosed.
yeah. And yes, definitely there was a lot of that Ritalin stage where they were giving students medicines. And now they've walked away from that. And it's a lot of like strategies and things like that we can do in the classroom.
Mhm.
Some students still do need Ritalin. Um, I'm not going to take that away from the medical people. Like some students just can't focus, like they
Yeah.
just can't. And then some students have both. They have ADHD and ADD, so they have a hyper and a lower one. So like it's off, it's balanced. Like they need to something to help regulate. And I mean, I'm not against medicine. I'm just saying, like exalt all your options before you move to the medication.
Sure.
And like you were saying, sometimes it was an environment thing. I know as a seventh grade teacher, some of the kids' IEPs would come, and after like 9 weeks, 12 weeks, I'd be like, let me go look back at this IEP because I haven't seen whoever this was in sixth grade.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a change sometimes in environment. There's a change in maturity. Sometimes to say it, sometimes there's some issues in one class that personalities don't mix. But I think as a parent and as an educator, you have to remember that we're here for the kids and like whatever fits best for them. Like it's not about me. It's more about them being able to research and access the education that I'm providing. I think a lot of teachers struggle with that because students have come in a different form. Like these kids are not my generation. Sometimes I'm like, wow, like y'all are really something special. So like, I think that you have to evolve and keep learning as an educator. And I think a lot of times people want to do what they did 10, 12 years ago. And it's like, I'm fairly new to education. Like I started a new position this year. I'm a instructional coach for teachers, for special ed teachers. which is amazing. I think I struggled first in the beginning because I'm like sitting at the table with these other two and they're like 17, 20 years education. And I'm like, wow. But I had to remember, like, God didn't put you at this table
Right.
just for you. Like your seat was made for you. So I sat down and I took God. So I think
Partook at the table. Yes.
yes, I deserve to be at this table. So I think that a lot of times we have to adjust and be flexible with our learning and teaching with students and working with them in groups and things like that. Because
Right.
a lot of times, sometimes you can be upset. Maybe they didn't learn these behaviors that you think is natural, like sitting in their chairs, being quiet and things like
Right.
that. Maybe they struggle with that. So I know for me, like I can't sit too long in a PD and not get up and go get some water or
Yeah.
get to moving. So I totally get it, and I'm snacking and moving my mouth because I gotta keep moving. So I get it with the kids. I think we just have to figure out ways that we can help them so they can be successful in life. Like it's not just about seventh grade. It's not just about eighth grade. It's about teaching these kids and working with the parents and having them realize like these skills are transferable to adults. Like
Right.
some adults tap their pens, some adults move their feet, like shake their legs, some
Right.
adults like clap their hands and things like that. So these are things that people do out in the general world. It's just
Right.
how can we get this energy out? Like I know for me, like even with my seventh graders, I didn't mind letting them walk the hallway. Like I'd be like, okay, well, I'm gonna stand here at the door and talk to the other kids. You just walk back and forth till you get
Right.
tired. And then it would kind of get their energy out. And they'd be like, I'm tired now, Miss Gittens. I'm like, okay, let's come back in. So
Right.
it helped them kind of calm down. It's like there's just trying different ways. So I
Yeah.
think that that's the piece that people, it's not like these ADHD and things are new. I
Right.
just think they're more visible and
Mhm.
understanding. And we're all looking at the differences and we're embracing them or trying to embrace them.
Right. Yeah. And you bring up good points because, like you say, this isn't something that is just, it's not new. The diagnoses aren't new. The behaviors aren't new. A lot of these are transferable to how we are as adults. And I think sometimes when you mention how we have to continue evolving and learning and trying to be creative in the ways that we teach and learn ourselves, it makes such good sense because it's like sometimes as adults, even me not being an educator, but as an adult, you forget what it was like to be a kid. Sometimes you forget that their attention span may not be as long. It's like, hell, me as an adult, I don't want to listen that long to somebody after a while. I didn't zoned out, thought about what I got to do for the rest of the week. Then I come back, so it's natural. So, when you say, hey, if a kid is shaking the leg or they got to get up and walk, like that's natural things. It's not to punish or chastise a child or whatever for things that are natural human behaviors. And so it's just being creative in how you approach the situation. So I really love that. One of the things I also wanted to ask you about, we talked a lot about behavioral and emotional instances with the children. Now, one thing for me that I've always wondered, because I said, Lord, whenever I have children, God bless them, because I'm just praying over them every day. They don't look like little Benjamin Buttons, but listen, like I already be thinking these classes that these kids be doing, like my niece that talks about these classes, and I would be up a creek without a paddle. I don't know some of the concepts that these kids are learning right nowadays. So how do you all determine, when a child just actually needs a tutor because maybe they are not performing as well in a subject versus, oh, this is an actual opportunity for them that they learn differently. Like this is a unique learning ability that we need to test them for.
I think the word for that would be consistently. Like if a student struggles with a unit or a student struggles with one piece of education, like if they struggle with maybe reading, decoding big words or something like that, that's when we start to see like if it's consistent, then that's when you start to kind of wonder like, okay, is this something that they're struggling with right now? Or is this a deficit or something that needs to be addressed on an IEP or even a 504?
Yeah.
I know that a lot of times when they're younger, we just kind of just finishing a reading specialist program. I remember them saying like a lot of times with the younger kids, they're like, oh, wait till fifth grade. Oh, wait till these grades. But if some of those interventions were brought earlier, maybe not, they wouldn't need an IEP in the fifth or sixth grade. So I think being proactive and being involved on the teacher's end kind of working with them and sending home skills and horning on like what they're struggling with, and keeping open communication with parents, because there are some parents that are willing to put their kids in those type of programs like Sylvan and all those other places to increase with their reading skills and working like private tutors and things like that.
Yeah.
So just keeping aware. I think that teachers are also people pleasers. So a lot of times they'll gas parents up and like, oh, little Johnny is so great. Da, da. And then, but it's also a personality thing, because I am not that teacher. So I struggled in my first couple of years because I was like, well, it is what it is. Like, like I didn't mean to hurt their feelings, but I was just like, yeah, I'm not going to lie.
Right.
There were parents that asked me to put things on IEP like he can read. And I'm like, no, not on grade level, but yes, he can read. So sometimes I think that us all taking a reality, and it's not a jab against anyone. It's not a jab against your parenting skills. It's not against the teacher. Let's all just work together and help our student get better, like finish the gap. Like a lot of times they're like, oh, well, maybe if I would have read more stories. Okay, well, we're past that point. What can we do now? What can we do to help your students? So a tutor is never a bad idea, because that's that one-on-one support that you can't really offer all the way at school. Like that tutor can focus their whole lesson on something your student is struggling. So if your student is struggling with reading comprehension, they can do 2 weeks, 2 times a week of reading comprehension and improve. And then summers are great to use those type of things. I've had friends that ask me about tutoring and things like that. And I'm like, yeah, go for it. Yeah. I did finish my reading. So they were like, can you do it? And I was like, no, because I have a relationship with your child. I don't think they'll take me as seriously as they would if it was a teacher that was at their school and things like that. So just utilizing those school resources, I think, are very important.
Yeah. And, Amanda, you brought up a good point, even as you were going through this, to identify whether it's a tutor or, hey, we got to go with the IAP process. And I think what's interesting is when we get to the point of realizing, okay, my student does need this extra assistance, they do need this extra support. And you hit on a little bit of where they may, parents may say, well, I should have read to them more and all these things, right? We're not going to gloss over the fact that this can be a chaotic event that disrupts in your life. I don't think any parent has a child and anticipates them to have a unique learning ability, right? That they may need extra care. They may need this extra support. And so naturally, when that comes about in their lives, it rocks their world a little bit, right? You go through all of the, like you say, the guilty narratives of maybe if I would have read to them more and I'd have read the more bedtime stories, if I would have went over their ABCs more, if I would have spent more time doing this, if I hadn't worked those late shifts at work, right? And you tell yourself all these things that ultimately just make you feel worse about yourself as a parent, but ultimately does not serve the child. And ultimately, I think it removes the ability for you to see that the child is still capable and well equipped to conquer all the goals that they need to accomplish, right? It's just in a different way that they learn versus the quote traditional student, right? And so how do you help? And I'm going to ask you this about the teachers and the students as well, but since we're talking about the parents now, because it seems like this is something that immediately hits them, right? And they have this reaction. How do you get them to kind of come to this place of peace to accept this is that my child has to learn in a unique manner, but this is okay. And these are the steps, what does that look like for you?
I think for me, it's a relationship building thing. So I've had every type of parent you can imagine. I've had parents come in with binders as thick as encyclopedias at these IEP meetings to tell me about their kid. I've had parents send me whole PowerPoint presentations about their son or daughter, like this telling me about their type of learning and things like that. So for me, those parents are ready and ripping, and they're ready to advocate for their kid, and I love it. Mm-hmm. Those are the parents that kind of struggle with me, because I am not the one that's going to send you an email every day. Like I'm going to celebrate your child's victories, but I'm going to celebrate them with your child so your child can come back and talk to you about it. Right. Because I feel like if I send it to you in an email, then I kind of make it to words about you. Right. Where I want your child to feel like this is about them and them to go home and tell you their victories.
Yeah.
So for that piece, I struggle with that type of parents, but towards the end, they usually love me because I'm that teacher that's like, look, these are called growing pains.
Mhm.
Yes, they suck. I know you don't want to read this. It's hard. I get it. But these are growing pains. And I'm telling you, when you grow and as a learner, I promise you will be coming back to thank me and things like that. So I think for me with parents, and I've even had parents in IEP, the little girl was in 7th grade and the mom was like, well, she gets to go to college. And it broke my heart because I'm like, yeah, why would you think she wouldn't? Like, it broke my heart because you think that that's the association with it. I've
Yeah.
had parents like once the kids got IEP, are they in the room with the chairs with the tennis balls on them? And I'm like, no, they're not at that level.
Mhm.
No, we're in the regular classrooms with the students, so we're good. I think it's more so understanding. Also, I always try to give them a breakdown to what each setting looks like. Like I
Mhm.
told them, like your child's going to be in there with a teacher and I and 14 other kids, like, and all these other kids, they're struggling too. So we're pushing along and we're working together and we're going to make it better.
Yeah.
In the team talk setting, it's them and some gen ed kids. We're all pushing together. Nobody knows their business. It's between me and them. Like
Yeah.
I don't call a kid out. I worked with every kid. Even my co-teacher, she worked with every kid. So it was like a unit.
Mhm.
I think that the problem is information. And I think that we need to update the narrative. I think that everyone thinks it's like those pattern rooms and things like that. If you haven't heard, I'm letting you know it's 2021 and special ed has evolved. And
Right.
the keyword for all of it is inclusion. So they want to include your special ed child in every class and every setting. So
Mhm.
equity and inclusion are the biggest thing that education has going on right now.
Mhm.
So what I tell you is to get knowledge about these two. And when you go to your IEP meetings and things like that, advocate for your kid.
Yeah, well, I mean, you hit it. You hit it, Amanda, because I think equity and inclusion is not just big now within the education field. It became a world known forefront things that to consider now, right? Because I think we were all the pandemic made the world all equal, right? It was something that
Yep.
every single race, every single gender, every single class, and it made people really have to take a look at what equity and inclusion look like. And when you talk about it from the perspective of the education field, and I hear you talking, it makes me think so like part of my method when I talk to clients about unleashing peace is, one of the last for the next to last steps is the comprehend method. And one of the things that you talked about just now is how you really thoroughly go through with the parents to help them understand, essentially what the problem is with people is they are conflicted with their belief of what something looks like you say, what their narrative is, what they're telling themselves, what this means about them as a parent, what this means about them as their child. And you have to get them to the point of wanting to understand, hey, your child is actually going to be in there with general population. This is what it looks like. This is maybe what your perception may have been, but this is reality. And just helping them to understand so that they can dispel the conflicts and the myths that they may have already had these preconceived notions. So I think that's really good. Now, for the teachers that you also coach, right? I think this is another different dynamic that you're working with. Now, how do you help them and like encourage them and get them to a place of peace when maybe it's a more challenging student than they expected? Like, maybe they've worked with the behavioral students before, those with the unique learning abilities. And they're like, well, this is different. This is hitting a little different, Miss Gittens. I don't know about this. I'm ready to throw it. I'm about to ready to risk it on this daggone job. Like how do you get them back to a place of peace of like, being again, like you've been in this space, even though you say you're newer in this space, you have been in this space for quite some time. You are well versed in this space and in this community. So how do you get them back to that place of peace?
So for the teachers, I think I can be honest with you. I've only worked with the teachers like in this role for a couple months, but I'm more tired. I feel like it's already June. So for me, I feel like working with adults is way more difficult than my students. I don't know why, but I just feel that way. So when you say working with teachers that are defeated or feeling like they don't know about a student and behavior, that has been my experience before.
Mm-hmm.
As I had the difficult child on my caseload and I had to coach my peers through, like,
Yeah.
look, I know you're mad.
Mm-hmm.
I know you're upset. Go get your Diet Coke and just meditate on that. And then tomorrow's a new day. And I think that that is key. And also reminding them that the child is human and they're still learning. And like, we don't know, not to blame any homes or anything like that. Like, we don't know what the child's been through. We don't know what happens when they go home. We don't know where they go. We don't know whose house they stay in. We don't know what life trauma they've been through. I wasn't there from birth to now, so I don't know. We don't know any of those things. Like, we only know what parents feel free to share with us and things like that. So I think that I always tell them, like, please remember, this is still a child. Like, even when they get on your last nerve and you are so upset, like, remember, this is still a child. Like, you have to understand, this is a child. This is somebody's child. And you want to treat them with care. You want to treat them as much as you would want someone to treat your own. If you don't have a child, as much as you would want them to treat your dog or cat. Like, I know our generation is, I'm without a child. But everybody's like, yeah, they got dog moms, cat moms, gerbils, like everything. Like, the way you want your child or pet to be treated, that's how you treat this student. I know a lot of times they take it. I think the first thing that they do is take it personal. And if we can get away from the personal part, then we can help the child. Like, it's not about me. Like, it's about how I can help this kid and what can I do. If it's a simple thing I can change to avoid the behaviors or help calm this child down. I know a lot of times teachers offer calm down areas and things like that. I was a big walker. Like, if the kid was upset, like, let's get them out of that environment. Let's go get some water. Let's take a walk. Let's change the scenery. Let's take some air. Also, I am calm by nature. So a lot of times I was usually the teacher that they were like, oh, Miss Gittens, can you take them? And I'm like, yes, because I was going to wait you out. Like, you're upset. And when you calm down, we can have a conversation. And so I was good at that. So teachers and students like that. And they were like, you're just so calm. And I'm like, yeah, because, I understand that you're a child and you're upset and something upset you. And like, I keep reminding the kid when I talk to him, like, it's okay to get upset. It's not okay to throw that chair. It's not okay to turn the desk, but it's okay to get upset. So just reminding teachers that it's okay for them to have emotions, but we want to teach them that the right ways and model and show them. And if I see you mad, then I'm going to get more mad. And those children are usually teacher pleasers. So then they're like, well, are you mad at me? Or like after they do those behaviors. So just reminding them and modeling for them, I think is key. In regards to teacher, I think just reminding them that they are children.
Right. That's a good point when you talk about even the modeling piece, because how often have we heard the term, I think, what is the term? Do as I say, not as I do, or something like that. Like, well, if you saying something, shouldn't your actions be following it?
Absolutely.
That statement never really made quite made sense to me, but I think you make a good point of modeling the behavior, right? You can't tell me not to react to emotions, but then I come out to get a little sip of water and I see you acting daggone fool outside. Like, you throwing pencils and papers and stuff too at the principal because you did that, right? So I think that's a good thing that you are sharing with them. You started to hit on even how you communicate with your students of it's not wrong that you're getting upset. It's unacceptable when you start throwing the chairs, right? So even when we talk in that space of helping the student when they have now been diagnosed, again, this is something that's directly affecting them. And even, again, I hate to think that kids can be cruel, but sometimes they are, right? And you have experiences where maybe they are teased or, they're maybe even embarrassed because if they haven't challenges with reading, maybe it's having to read out loud, right? And they're embarrassed by that, right? So there's a number of things that may come along with that in the classroom. So how do you then, aside from, helping them to understand what's acceptable versus not acceptable and those emotional behavioral realms, how do you help them to kind of accept what is and keep going?
So I can say a couple years ago, I guess when I was in college, or I just think like the educational change in regards to bullying, it was a lot of like anti-bullying and things like that. And I think it worked. I think that a lot of my students, like when they had those emotionals, A lot of the students were very understanding and compassionate with them. It was
Good.
no teasing that I heard. The only thing I heard, it was a couple years ago. I guess they got it off a comedy YouTube skit or something. They were like, "Oh, you act so spad," and it was like, "Wait a minute!" So we had to stop that.
Mm-hmm.
But the teasing, I say, it wasn't like our generation. Like
Yeah.
I remember some things, and I don't see as much. I know a couple of days ago, a student had an emotional episode, and then we were walking with him, and another student was like, "Are you okay?" Like very compassionate. Like, "You
Mm-hmm.
want to play with my fidget?" Like, what
Oh,
happened? Like they literally, it was kind of like a counseling session, and we just sat back and let it go because we were
yeah.
like, it's best to learn from your peers, like
Right.
So he also reflected on some times when he was angry. So that was a moment like I didn't plan that, we didn't anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I could say that the students are a little bit more compassionate. But in regards to the students in the special ed, I know when they came to seventh grade, a lot of them were a little bit embarrassed about the class and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. And so I think for me, it was just like, okay, yeah, we're still learning the same thing they're learning in the other class, but
Right.
I'm just it's a little bit slower. So I made sure to do the activities that they saw. So my peers were doing like flags of origins and things like that. And they were like,
Mm-hmm.
we saw this. And I'm like, just you wait, we're going to get there. So I'm like, just you wait, we're going to get there. And even though it was like 2 or 3 weeks after them, I still went, I still laminated them, I still put them on the wall. Like some of my greatest mentors were gen ed teachers, and I would consult with them, and they're like, yeah, give them the experience. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so for me, I told those kids, like, this class is like taking a tour. Like,
Mm-hmm.
when you visit a country, you don't get to see everything, but you get to see the highlights.
Yeah.
That's what we're here for. We're here to show you the highlights of US history or the highlights of English and things like that. We want you to get it, and then you can move on to the next and things like that. So
Mm-hmm.
don't feel like you're different. And if you work hard enough, maybe I will put you out there into that team taught setting. And I was encouraging about that. Like I didn't tell the kid that they were stuck where they're at. And I was like, you make the difference. The quicker you learn your the way you learn and the needs that you need, and you're able to excel with them, then I can move you on up to the next class. So
Right. Right.
um, I did do a lot of that. Like once the kids showed it, like I put them out there. Like if they were in a small group and they
Mm-hmm.
were doing well, I was like, okay, get you a little challenge, a little rigor. So
Right.
we would put you out there into those team talk. So I think for me, I was more of like motivating the kids. Like you can do this. I know my first year I was doing reading. That was rough, but I was like, you guys can do it and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And crazy story was a kid that I had my first year came back 2 years ago and was just like, thank you, because everything you said
Wow.
happened. Like, I wish I would have listened to you earlier, but what you said, and I didn't even think the little girl liked me. I was like, oh, okay, all right, girl. So you got to celebrate the victories. But yeah, like I'm saying, like, you never know. Like, you just have to put out the positive and keep the kids motivated.
Right, right. And I think that's so good when you even break it down like that. I love the analogy of the tour. Like, listen, we're just getting the top highlights. You may not get to see the whole country, but you're getting the best parts of the country, right? You're getting some of the highlights of the country. And I think that's so important because, how often in life do we think that we're behind someone? Even as adults, we think we're behind the scale. We think we are behind in life, whether it is to get the big job, whether it is to get the promotion, to get the engagement, to get
Mm-hmm.
the marriage, to have the children, right? All those things that we think we are behind the scale with. And everybody has their journey. Everybody comes to that place at their own timing, and it's understanding that we're going to get there. Everybody's going to get there.
Yep.
It's different timing, and it's okay. It doesn't mean that someone else is superior because they got to the flags 2 weeks before, because they all learned the same information, right? And I think that's something that is a good lesson for us all to remember. It's like, it doesn't matter when we're getting to, as long as we learn the lesson, but applying ourselves, being willing to learn, to put in the work, helps us to get there quicker than maybe we even anticipated, right? So that's really good. So Amanda, look, girl, you didn't told me some stuff today. I almost wish I could take a class, because I knew it was a lot of things in the classes that I felt wasn't necessary. So I kind of wish I could have got the tour. Girl, I want the highlight tour. But this has been so good, so helpful. And I know, again, so timely with our children going back to school and just helping parents to navigate some of those relationships. So I like to end my episodes with these rapid value questions for my guests. It kind of just ties it up in a bow for the listeners. So you ready? It's 4 questions. It's the first thing that comes to your mind. Okay.
Go
Ready?
ahead. Yeah, sorry. I thought you was going to ask first, but go ahead.
Okay. Number one is, what is one thing that you like to do to sustain or reset your peace?
I would say walking, taking a walk or stroll in the neighborhood, nature, whatever. Walking has always been therapeutic for me.
Yes, same, same. Okay, name one book or song that's helped you define peace.
I would say Thank You by Marvin Sapp.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Okay. How do you define peace for yourself now?
As an adult, I think peace is where I try to strive to continue to be. Like it's not somewhere I visit. I want to reside there. So just taking the road to get there to stay
Yes,
there.
yes, I know that's right. Okay, last question is a fill in the blank. It's three blanks, but the first one will be easy because it's just your name. So it's my name is blank, and without peace, I'd probably be blank, but with peace, I am blank.
My name is Amanda, and without peace, I would be extremely lost. And with peace, I feel whole.
Yes, yes, girl, you better be out here whole. Okay. Okay, thank you again so much, girl. I appreciate you gracing us with your presence. Love you so much.
Love you too. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
Man, wasn't that good? I told y'all, look, some good information was shared there, and I hope you all found it to be valuable. I mean, when Amanda shared that as parents, she gets it and she understands that this is your baby and this is the person you bring into the world. But it's not a reflection of you, right? This is not a situation that is your fault. And so recognizing that, again, this situation that your child has a unique learning disability, it is not a reflection of you as a parent, but what it does take, and what I loved that she emphasized, is how it really takes the collaboration of the parent, the child, and the teacher to come up with a plan, to also comprehend. And that's one of the things we talk about in the peace framework is helping each other to comprehend where the other is coming from, right? That's the best way to learn how to communicate effectively, is if we help each other understand where the other is coming from, showing that empathy to say, listen, I get it. You're the parent and I understand how you must be feeling, but this is what we need to do. This is the systems we need to put in place to help your child, because as the teacher, right, I also care about your student. Similarly, sometimes it takes her as the educational instructor to speak to her teachers and remind them that they're children, right? We so often forget what it was like to be a child. And sometimes it has nothing to do with having a unique learning disability. It's just being a child and we're bored. They're bored sometimes, right? I know as an adult, we get bored. And so it is just, again, having those dialogues, being open to communication and recognizing that all the parties involved are invested in that student's success. And so, again, I hope you found this to be valuable, even if you are not a parent, or if you're not a parent of a student with a unique learning ability. I hope you found some value in this. It helps you understand children a little more, or the jobs of our wonderful educators and the responsibility they had during this pandemic. And if you know a teacher and educator in your life, make sure you extend some extra grace to them. Make sure you are extending some compassion to them and support in how they are showing up for your student. And teachers likewise understand where parents are coming from, right? This is their baby. This is their jewel. And just keep those lines of communication open. I would also employ you all to share this with someone. Again, even if you aren't a parent or a parent of a child with a unique learning ability, share this. If you think someone else will find it to be helpful, please do not keep this information to yourself. Amanda gave a lot of great information and resources for your state as well. And so definitely utilize that. Again, please do not keep this. I cannot stress it enough because it's such good information and such valuable information. So aside from that, I would absolutely love to hear from you all. What were your key takeaways from this episode? If there was something that specifically resonated with you, or, if there was something that you think, hey, I would like Patrice for something else to be expanded on this topic that may be helpful, shoot me an email, slide in my DMs. I love to hear from you all. I'm always interested in what is important to you all, what's helpful to hear about. And so if you think this is a topic worth expanding on, I'm totally open to that as well. Let me know what you're thinking, okay? Until next time, I want you to live your best life and embody peace without ever compromising your authentic identity. Love, light, and especially peace, y'all.